ambiguity does not do anything for anyone. We had multiple departments at the tech company that I built and grown over time. So now you have dozens of people per department. And all of a sudden, if someone in a department is doing something, it doesn't become an issue of a person per se. It's like that department. So for example, the sales team would have trouble with the onboarding team. The sales team would sell, say, a website package, and the onboarding team's job is to launch that and provide good customer service. So then the sales team is compensating accordingly. But the sales team doesn't get paid until the site goes live. So there's this internal conflict of like, build the thing as quick as possible, but do a good job because I want to retain that client. So as the company was growing, I would get feedback like the onboarding team is so slow. They're not getting back to my clients enough. And then the onboarding team would say things like sales doesn't give us enough information to be able to properly onboard the client. And this would happen often. Finally, I was like, whoa, hold up here. How is any of that actionable? You can't really take action on ambiguity. So what I did is I said, who on the sales team do you think isn't providing enough information? They said, Ron. Ron sold this deal, didn't give me enough information. Has this happened before? It happens a lot. Does it only happen with Ron? No, it happens with a few other people. Okay, let's tackle Ron first. Ron's a leader. Then I go to Ron. I said, Ron, who are you having an issue with on the onboarding team? I'm having an issue with Susan on the onboarding team. Susan always seems to fumble my clients, and it's creating like a whole set of issues. So we literally say, okay, great. And they didn't know it. I said, hold on a second. If I'm talking to Susan, I'm talking to Ron. I patched the other person in on a 3-way call, just a phone call. And I patch him in. I said, hey, Ron, I got Susan, Ron. And now all of a sudden they have to work it out.
Yeah.
And what happens is they talk about the thing that's going on. And typically it's a process related thing. It's a miscommunication. And we get to the bottom of it right there.
Yeah.
So what I learned is you have to be very specific about issues that happen in an organization. And when conflict arises, the quicker you can be specific and get all the parties in the room and get away from they, we, these ambiguous terms that really mean nothing, the faster you're going to resolve the conflict.
This is really interesting. So it's the ambiguity, which is the tip-off of this might be a systemic kind of conflict that could really cause a bunch of problems. Let's get specific. And by getting specific, then we can resolve this thing that prevents the systemic issue.
I always told my team speed wins. So if there's an issue, you need to resolve it immediately because you don't want this built up animosity about things that can be controlled and constrained because the other side isn't understanding. So It also creates an opportunity for empathy to say, well, here's what I go through versus sitting here in a corner bitching about the other department. Like nothing happens then.
So when you set up these calls that you said that they're not really expecting, are you mediating it in a way that is empathetic? To me, that seems very, I was going to say disarming. Like, I don't know what I do. Like all of a sudden I got to address Ron. How does that play out differently than if you said, hey, I'm going to set up a call, between you two?
I think you don't get the rawness if you set something up, right? And it's softer. If you do it on the spot, like you get to the root of the issue faster. And then think about you setting up a call. Now you're looking at calendars.
Yeah.
And now what if something comes up? Now you're pushing this thing down the road and it's happening again and again. So why not solve it? I'm not saying you could do this for everything. If there's a huge systemic issue and things aren't connecting, like from a technology standpoint, or the million things that could happen, it may not be possible. You may need to set up a call and break it down. But the reality is most conflicts can be resolved by just having an open dialogue and communication with the other party, using specifics to get to the root of the issue.
Do you often find in those circumstances that there was, call it like fault on both sides, and everybody then feels like, okay, I can learn from this, and now Susan and Ron are going to work better together versus someone's walking out like, see, I knew I was right.
Most times there's lack of empathy on both sides.
Mm-hmm. Going into it.
So the sales team isn't thinking about the onboarding team and how they just got triple the amount of clients they normally have. 2 people are on vacation. This person's trying to do their best. Ron doesn't understand that. And if that's a true issue, like that can be solved in a different way. I'm not saying that's an excuse, but he may not think that until that other person's on. Uh-huh. And I would say like that's not a great excuse in a company anyway. You should solve for that. But things happen and you need to be empathetic when they do.
Right.
The other side of it is the sales team's job is to sell. Like nothing happens in a company if there's no revenue. So I don't want my sales team focusing on customer service stuff all day long or getting bitched at by their clients or getting someone to cancel because we didn't launch them fast enough. So you have to have empathy on that side too, that their paycheck is contingent on this launch.
Is there a complement to this in terms of that is a quick reaction to turn the ambiguity into specificity, resolve it, quick move on, speed wins, where you have a more proactive approach sometimes to like really encourage the kind of constructive collaboration that can have tension in it between the team members so that some of these things don't arise later?
Yeah, all the time. So we would look at blockers and the root cause. And sometimes it's as much as like maybe the product is just so complicated that it takes a long time to onboard. I'll give you an example of that. We created this product called Online Shopper, and it was the first in the automotive space to really be able to do a lot of the deal online. Like traditionally, even today, I'd argue that most people don't buy a car completely online. So this actually like ingested paperwork. It would scan documents a dealer had. This was like 2015. It would send over a DocuSign-like thing to that customer, and it would really advance, but it was also very complex. So the onboarding for that product would take like 90 to 120 days. And through that process, again, the salesperson doesn't get paid. A lot of people would drop off because they weren't ready for it. They weren't ready to send us all their documents that we could scan. They weren't ready for this complexity, this build that we created. And we found a systematic problem that stemmed from onboarding. We're like, why is it taking so long? Because we don't get paid either. And so it just didn't make any sense. So we actually stripped down the entire product offering, and we got way more dealers, and it accelerated way faster because I think the product was just ahead of its time. But that's an example of a systemic issue that we looked at data to then get in front of it to say it wasn't anyone's fault per se. It was arguably my fault because we created this product that was too complex.
So to make this personal then a little bit, even though Go right now has smaller teams, and you're saying this is a problem you've often seen with organizational departments becoming kind of the personified out group or whatever, us versus them, that probably doesn't exist as much for the CEO. Maybe it does in terms of the management team or something like that. The management team's doing this. But how do you encourage constructive feedback to be given to you to address some of these things?
I've learned to have a very non-ego approach to this and know that I am not perfect and I don't have all the answers, but I've also realized I'm in a space where I'm not an expert in certain areas. Like, for example, my head of sales is far more of an expert in retail than I am. So I lean on him, and I think he knows I lean on him and I have trust in him. It really doesn't come up as much as I'm making these isolated decisions. I've also learned that I shouldn't be making decisions on behalf of the department. I need their buy-in. And if I want something to go a direction, I could lead them in that direction. And if I'm wrong, they'll clearly tell me that. And we've had conflict early on because I had ideas that were different than what the beverage industry has seen in the past.
Oh, okay.
They were just way different. For example, traditionally you'd have sales reps for certain areas or regions, and the rate of sale for non-alcoholic beverages is such that it will never pencil out. It is a futile effort. And I say that because if you pay a sales rep, I'm just throwing out a number, this wouldn't be accurate, but like you pay him $70,000 a year to cover a certain territory. There's only so many doors that this person can go into on a monthly basis. If you take all those doors and all the cases that those doors can buy, it doesn't even equate to what that person's salary would be.
Yeah.
Because non-alcoholic beer moves slower, it can reach more places, but it moves slower. So then I said, well, what if we empower our customers as an extension of our sales team? And you make it softer. So there's not mandates, there's not anything like that, but they're touching these accounts, they're talking to the general managers and the buyers at these on-premise places like bars and restaurants. And to me, that's much more of a validated, credible salesperson, your customer, than someone walking in off the street once a month, say, hey, I'm Sally and I'm, the new rep for Go. So that was my idea, right? And it was met with like, well, I don't know if that'll work because it had never been really done before.
Yeah.
So we essentially came up to like a happy medium of how we're going to go to market with that. And we did, and it's been, I would say, fairly successful. So it's because it's completely different. But like, I wasn't going to push it so hard to say like, you are absolutely wrong and I'm right. It was a good collaborative, confrontational, but important moment of like two people thinking different, because I'm coming from outside the space. I always think like of a tech or software forward approach to things and how to scale them. And he's coming in from like, hey, I've been in the beverage industry for 20 years. Like who are you to tell me? But when you have those two things meet, like magic can happen. And that's what we're seeing at Go. overall because we really lean on tech.
And getting specific through all of that discussion and collaboration
Yeah.
as well. Makes a ton of sense, but I think it's so hard for people to see that, like, and change habits. Like, people have a natural inclination towards conflict or collaboration, or like those phone calls. I can imagine a lot of discomfort, but it's working. So the discomfort that's making it work.
Yeah, I mean, it gets to the point now, if I called someone, they would wonder if I'm someone else is on the line.
It's like junior high. They were here all along. Like,
But they
hate
could also
Susie.
solve things ahead of time, right? And I was
Yeah.
like, you guys could solve this. Like, if you got me involved or I'm seeing things from the outside or hearing things, like, that's not a good thing. I grew this thing to 900 employees. So, like, most of what I was dealing with was conflict. And it was like, okay, let's get to the root of it. And that's why I say, like, next week is such a bad thing. It's not like things can happen next week. I think that's can be taken out of context. It's like you got to be specific of the date that you're going to either touch base on the thing, because it might take a year to get done, and you want to give a status update. And maybe that's not next week. Maybe that's a date in the future, but get specific on it. The same thing here is like the more specific you can get, the expectations then aren't ambiguous, and now you're aligned on what the outcome should be.
Yeah. Well, but you glossed over this, like, and taking you out of it. Like, next time, you don't need to set up that call. They can just call each other and say, we need to figure this out.
And I highly encourage that too. I said, have you talked to them? Have you set a meeting with them? Instead of you coming to me bitching about it, have you talked to them? Once you have a conversation with this employee in another department and say, like, you really want him to be successful here.
Yeah.
And you're seeing these things that are not good and will probably lead to him not being here in the future. Because if you come in from a positive intention of like, hey, I see what you're doing, and what you're doing isn't really working or beneficial, and I really want you to be successful. I like you a lot. You have a good work ethic. You're just not getting these things. Then I think it's met with open arms because the intention's good. And at the end, that employee is either going to listen or, maybe he won't work out because he's essentially giving a warning of something that's going to happen.
Yeah. It's good constructive advice, man. Awesome.
There's a lot there, man. A lot there.
All right. Till next time.